Hello and welcome in, everybody. Week 13 officially in the books, and another hefty week of fantasy down. We had some big names that kind of took a stinker this week, and a couple of guys that just absolutely lit it up. A lot to talk about. As always, we are your Titans of fantasy. I am your host, Garrett Daigle. With me, my co-host, Caleb Armstrong. We're going to kind of run through the typical gauntlet here: key injuries, fantasy breaking news, some rumors, studs and duds from the week. We'll go over upcoming buys, some waiver wire ads, and some deep ads, guys, you might want to stash. And our very first ad read. So our ad read today, coming in hot, our clothing sponsor, looking fresh. Lee Daigle Construction. Was founded in 1997 by Lee Daigle, a licensed contractor. Lee began his contracting career in 1984 and has built hundreds of custom fireplaces and completed other masonry work throughout that same time period. Lee and his team firmly believe that personal attention to detail, as well as working closely with each customer, is the key to long-term success. Contact them today to learn more about your own custom masonry projects and getting that started. They cover all of the Northwoods and many other surrounding areas in Wisconsin. Visit LeeDaigleConstruction.com today. All right, Caleb. Let's go over it, baby.
All right.
Let's hear it.
First big injury of the week that we want to talk about. Guy who's been coming along here, one of the top wide receivers in the draft. Really starting to come into his own, made a spectacular catch. Kind of had the same thing last week, with, can't remember who it was who got that nasty head injury in the end zone on an unnecessary roughness call. Mm-hmm. This kind of was the same way. Treylon Burks goes down with a concussion. He'll be likely out for week 14, and it looked a lot scarier than thankfully it was. He went down, never moved, but was full extension backside, and basically just took a helmet to helmet, led in the end zone, never came up, but still held on to the ball, surprisingly, for a touchdown. So hopefully Burks, though, he, like I said, rookie season kind of started slow there for a while. Then he had that injury, but ever since he's came back from an injury, had looked promising, and, living up to his draft capital here as of late.
Yeah, I mean, that was an absolute heck of a grab by him, but it was pretty nasty to see him get lit up, and he didn't move after making that catch. Another injury from this week, we saw Aaron Jones kind of deal with a shin injury. He was in and out of the game, and we saw A.J. Dillon kind of come in and go off for 18 carries, 93 yards against the Bears. Bears are one of the worst run defenses in the league, but not quite what you were hoping out of Aaron Jones, who had a big day expected out of him this week, and that's definitely an injury you're going to have to monitor. He was in and out, and we'll kind of see what happens with him. No big designation so far. Doesn't seem to be so serious, but might be nagging for him.
One common trend that I saw actually talking, and I can't remember who posted it, but talking about A.J. Dillon. Through his first 3 seasons in the year, he has averaged below single-digit carries through week 1 through 12. But when the cold weather strikes in Lambeau, he averages double-digit carries in the second half of the season. Huh. So we've seen him have a good week last week against the Eagles with the double-digit carries, and now this week again, like Garrett said, against a very poor run defense in the Bears, he kind of has another big day, and you might see the bull get a little more carry here in the cold. So A.J. Dillon fans here and owners are probably getting a little excited for that. But big loss, not as fantasy-wise, but more as a team-wise in the actual NFL. Jimmy G breaks his foot, season-ending injury, and the big thing to think about this is right now the free agent quarterback market is absolutely just it's bad. It's very poor. They made a move already last night. They signed Josh Johnson, who has been bounced around the league for the longest time in multiple teams. They signed him off the Broncos practice squad. They basically bring in Mr. Irrelevant, who looked actually very solid in his little time we saw there. Pretty capable of being that starter for a while if he plays at that level. Brock Purdy, but like they talked about, like the top free agents right now was if they would have to chalk out Drew Brees or Phillip Rivers, basically out of retirement. But we're gonna just step right into one of our big news clips that we wanted to talk about, and you see a lot of rumors here. I don't know how you feel about this, Garrett, but Baker Mayfield was released from Carolina Panthers today, so kind of weird timing with this all because considering that San Fran is looking for their guy. Poor Christian McCaffrey can't just get away from this guy.
Yeah.
If Baker ends up being in San Fran, that sucks there. But, I would not be shocked, I guess. I don't know. I don't really see it happening, but I also wouldn't be shocked if Baker somehow lands in San Fran.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where it's like it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. Baker Mayfield obviously has not looked really good the last several years, and he's been pretty terrible for the Panthers since he's been over there. I think with him being a first overall pick and, those first round QBs, they just get a longer leash, whether it's warranted or not. But if Baker Mayfield was a second, third, fourth round pick, I think he'd be out of the league by now. But since he is where he is, he's a guy who's been, given a lot more chances than he probably deserves. So that's a good reason why he might get signed. But I still think there's a good shot that the 49ers just say, hey, we're good with what we got, whether it's a questionable call or a person they don't know much about. They've seen Brock Purdy in practice, and now he came out and had a decent outing to open up his first game. So, yeah, definitely a situation to watch for and kind of a nice, some drama that could unfold.
Yeah.
Another injury we saw this past week was Ken Walker, knocked out early in the game. It sounds like early on this was a foot, it was a sprain, and he could miss this next week. It's not. It was designated as not a high ankle sprain, but more of a strain in his foot. So a little bit unusual injury that we've seen. Even Coach Carroll came out and said it's not an injury that they've seen before, but more of an inflammation kind of thing that has popped up. Really strange.
Want to hammer on it again because we covered it last week. Carry your handcuffs, guys, going into playoffs. This is just, one of those moments where it's proving like this. Seeing Ken Walker, who's been just a bull, go down, and if you're a guy who is going in your playoffs and you just lose a guy like Ken Walker, that's going to be a tough position to replace. And we mentioned it, we hammered home on it last week about all these top handcuffs to grab. DJ Dallas was one of our mentions, actually. And now we'll cover him a little later in the episode, but he might have some value going forward here. Also, one of the guys we're going to be covering down in our waivers is related to this guy as well. And a huge, kind of a big loss. He started off really hot, has been slower down, but still probably a QB1 for fantasy relevance is Lamar Jackson. He goes down with a knee injury, and Jim Harbaugh came out today and said John Harbaugh, is going to be week to week for his injury. We've seen now with Lamar in the past couple of years miss some time, and we're going to cover the guy who honestly is a pretty respectable replacement for Lamar for fantasy relevance and kind of for, honestly, NFL-wise. He's not a bad backup at all, and we'll cover him later in the episode here.
Yeah. It's been interesting to see kind of how Tyler Huntley has stepped in with Lamar out, but yeah, huge injury to a big-name quarterback for fantasy. Another quarterback we've talked about a little bit, Matt Stafford, officially put on season-ending IR. It sounds like he has a neck issue. The team is going to exercise extreme caution, especially given their record and how the number of injuries they've had and how the season's gone. But, for a team bouncing back after the Super Bowl, huge implications for fantasy. They've had a pretty rough start already, but the idea that they're going to rush Cooper Kupp back with Stafford out pretty low, so probably won't be seeing him during your fantasy championship run, that's for sure. No reason to rush him back, especially with Stafford out. And, just a tough situation all around for that team.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's a spinal cord contusion. I don't know the whole limits on that, but anything that relates to the spinal cord is definitely a scary subject. And he's dealt with some major back problems last year at the end of the year. He was dealing with some tendonitis this year. So, Matt Stafford is coming around the ripe age of 35 next season. It will be interesting to see what his future holds. I'm not making any conclusions yet here, but if this injury continues, it could be something where it keeps him out for quite extended period of time with something, especially with the spinal cord related. Garrett, this next guy, I'm gonna let you actually cover him because you know a little more information on this injury here.
Yeah, so the Jalen Waddle injury that came out this week, it sounds like he sustained a leg injury during the game that forced him out for some time before he ended up returning. Really, at this point, there's not a lot of information out there. They haven't come out and said exactly what it was or if he expects to miss time. The 49ers are arguably one of the best defenses in the league, so if he could have been out there during that game more, he would have been, but he was pretty much shut down this past week against the 49ers. Only had one grab for 5 targets for 9 yards. Really an extremely quiet day for Waddle, who's been a beast for fantasy. But that's the situation where we're going to have to check more on later in the week once they've come out with some practice reports on why he's out. But just so far, it's just a leg injury, and it's been pretty quiet.
Yeah. The next guy here with a late game kind of scratch of the week. He had limited participation and then he didn't practice at all, but he actually played through this injury in week 12, and that was David Njoku. He had a knee injury. Like I said, he had a limited participation one day, but then a whole bunch of DNPs, did not practice, and then was announced out on Friday. So with that was kind of like, okay, they know what they got in Njoku. They aren't really in playoff implications right now, but they figured that, let this guy get healthy, and if we keep winning games, there is a chance for playoffs. So it was weird to see them hold him out after he actually, I believe, played through it on week 12, because it had happened in the middle of the game, week 12, and then he finished the game still.
Yeah,
so
they did say it was different than the other injury that he had that kept him out of the games earlier. So it's just interesting that he's dealing with multiple issues going on there.
And he's dealt with that his whole career for the most part so far. Njoku obviously has showed a lot more flash this year than he has in the past. And you're kind of, as an owner, you're hoping to rush him out there and see what he can get with that chemistry build with Deshaun Watson, who is officially back.
Yeah. And another tight end that has kind of emerged as some spotty relevance throughout the year was Hayden Hurst, who, a good matchup this week against the Kansas City Chiefs. Had a good opportunity to get some grabs out there, but he was downgraded to out while during the game this past week. Sounds like he was sidelined with a calf injury, and that calf injury is expected to keep him out for one more week. So they do say that he's already doubtful for Week 14 against the Browns, and this calf injury is something that he could possibly come back from, but right now it sounds like it's probably not going to be a situation that he'll be back this next week. In his place, Mitchell Wilcox is the tight end that's going to be stepping up for him, a name to keep an eye out for if you do have to have a streamer, potential option there.
Yeah, and hopefully Hayden Hurst, it doesn't get upgraded to a calf strain, because I think last year last year was the year of calf strains. Remember, guys, a calf strain's a tricky injury where it seems like guys like literally could almost play through it, but it's a lot of pain, and they suffer. And we haven't heard exactly what the whole extent of the injury was, just that it was a calf injury. So, there was last year. I remember George Kittle missed 6 weeks. I feel like with that calf strain he was dealing with, and it just seemed like every week he was limited participation. Oh, doesn't play. So hopefully it doesn't go to that extent here with Hayden Hurst. But now, moving on, guys. There's our news. There's our injury updates. Moving on, Team Stud. and versus Team Dud. This week, a guy, I don't think we even have to mention that he's been in the top category basically all year. He's been probably one of the most consistent quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts absolutely shreds the Titans defense this week. 380 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns through the air, 1 rushing touchdown.
And
It
the
goes
Titans,
off. Yeah.
Titans are a very respectable defense.
Yes.
They're one of the better in the league, so it's, for him to go and shred them up. I want to point out, and I'll play spoiler here, but A.J. Brown is also on our list. One thing that was absolutely comical in this game is A.J. Brown, I think he caught a 40-yard touchdown pass from Jalen Hurts, gets pushed out of bounds, and they end up calling it back. So they do a review. It takes some time. After they come back, they snap another ball, and he throws another 40-yard touchdown pass to A.J. Brown. So back-to-back, gets him again. This time down the other sideline, catches a monster bomb right over the shoulder of the defender. Absolutely unreal pass, unreal catch.
Yes. One guy who's been getting hot, and the whole team is in general here with a big win this week, Joe Burr. He started off the season a little cold, so did the whole Bengals offense in general. But now it seems like they're rolling. They take down the mighty Chiefs this week, and they're kind of catching strides like they did last year at the same time. So Burrow had almost 300 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown as well. But then, the guy who's been also, I feel like, just so underlooked as how good he's had of a season is Geno Smith. He's also one of our top guys. Almost 400 passing yards through the air, 3 touchdowns against Los Angeles Rams. Has really turned around the Seahawks from a team who was supposed to be a rebuild, all this stuff, take all these picks. Right now, Seattle is locked in kind of at the number 3 overall pick, and it looks like they have their franchise QB for a little while still. Geno is 31, 32, but I could definitely see him getting a big contract this offseason at the way he's been playing. Into our running backs here. Christian McCaffrey kind of had one of his big games through the air and on the ground again. 70 yards on the ground, 80 yards through the air, also a touchdown on top. Dual threat purpose. Tony Pollard keeps up the hot streak. I mean, doesn't matter how many touches he's getting, he's going to put up points. He had 12 rushes only for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. Busted a big one. And then Samaje Perine has put up 3 RB1 weeks in a row, 3 top 5 RB1 weeks in a row as the backup. This is we're talking about handcuffs, guys. This is where you got your backups that are just come in and they get their opportunities and they shine. Perine almost 100 yards on the ground, almost an additional 50 through the air. So a little bit of a dual threat guy there as well, which we've seen from him in the past. I would say 3 years. Perine's been a top handcuff. He never has really taken the whole role as like his own, but when he gets his name called, he comes out and he delivers. Yeah. And then some big wide receiver performances this week. Again, Devontae Adams has been on an absolute tear as of late. 3 out of his last 4 games, he's put up 30 fantasy points or more. This week, he had 8 catches for 180 yards about and 2 touchdowns. Amon-Ra, 11 catches for 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, Amon-Ra is the sun god, no doubt about that.
Sun god.
And then, like Garrett already mentioned, A.J. Brown, 8 catches, 120 yards, and 2 touchdowns as well. Kind of a poor week for tight ends. The big names really had bust weeks, and the fact of that they're normally 2, where, you got guys like Greg Dulcich and Noah Fant, who are the tight end 1 and 2 this week. Dulcich honestly had kind of a big game, 6 catches for 80 yards, 85 yards. And then Noah Fant, 4 catches for 41 yards and a touchdown. And then Evan Ingram also mixed in there. He had a high target game, little yards for his catches and targets, so only 30 yards through the air on 5 catches and a touchdown on top, which was kind of the icing.
Yeah, just kind of a weak, like you said, a weak tight end week. Yeah, just a poor showing on their end. You're used to seeing your Travis Kelce's out there put up some monster games, or somebody come out with a 2 touchdown game, or somebody over 100 yards, but pretty quiet on that end. I think all the points went to kickers this week. Kickers and defenses. On to our duds for this week. So we have some big names in kind of across the board. There were a lot of monster names that had 5 points or less. So we mentioned a lot of the injuries. Lamar Jackson, Jimmy G, both those guys knocked out of the game this week. Both put up less than 5 points. But Deshaun Watson, in his first game back, hasn't played for pretty much a year and a half, 2 years. Goes 12 for 22, 131 yards. A lot of people, I think, felt conflicted because, obviously he's put up some really good fantasy stats in the past. And he's playing against his former team, a revenge game, but also they're one of the worst passing defenses, or worst defenses in the league in general. Goes out, puts up an absolute stinker of a week, cannot keep the ball moving in that offense, and it was rust. Obvious tough game. Hopefully a tough crowd out there too. But yeah, rough go. And then we talked about some injuries for Ken Walker. Ended up with 3.6 points, but there were two, I think, good flex options out there that a lot of people started in Gus Edwards and Kyron Williams, who had 1.2 for Gus Edwards and 0.9 for Kyron Williams. Extremely quiet games. Kyron, unfortunately, I think was a victim of Cam Akers having a big game. They decided to shift the carries over to him, and he had, an extremely fair outing. But yeah, just kind of an odd game for Gus Edwards, who we thought of as, a better flex option after getting healthy.
Yeah, for sure.
In the receivers, we saw, a couple guys. We mentioned Jalen Waddle, who got knocked out of the game and was in and out. But then Michael Pittman with 2.6 points and George Pickens with 0.7 points. Two very quiet games, kind of the similar situation. Pittman, with Matt Ryan back, we thought he could have a little bit more target volume headed his way. Very quiet outing. And then George Pickens, a guy who's had better connection with Kenny Pickett throughout the season and a good matchup against the Falcons. Quiet out there. On to our tight ends. I'm going to pick on these guys because we have a little bit higher expectations. Travis Kelce with 5.6 points. For him, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. It's not what you're expecting. But had that been like a tight end streamer, 5.6 points isn't the worst thing you can do.
No.
Dalton Schultz had 4.3 and George Kittle had 3.2 points. So quiet outings for those guys who all you have some better expectations of. It sounds like if you look at the Cowboys and the 49ers, all the opportunities in those two offenses kind of got dispersed. The Cowboys absolutely lit it up in the rush game, and the 49ers, CMC, just absolutely took over. So just a different shift in those ball games, but duds nonetheless.
By Mageddon week.
By Mageddon.
Kind of a big one, too, for those guys who are really trying to get their final win for the playoffs, or those leagues where the playoffs start early. And we have some big buys. There's 6 teams on buys this week. So that rate alone should, start making some teams, find some fillers. And Packers, Bears, Saints, Washington, Indianapolis, and Atlanta all have buys. Truthfully, though, only 2 big quarterback losses, I would say, or one major one in this one with Justin Fields, who's been lighting it up at the quarterback helm. But honestly, quarterbacks aren't, but everything else, wide receivers and running backs are some big losses there. Yeah. So we're going to give you some opportunities here. We're going to give you some possible flyers, some ads, some waiver wire pickups who could help fill in some of these positions. And I'm going to name these guys right off the get-go. These are our priority ads. If they're on waivers, these guys are mainly taken up in over 50% of leagues. But these guys, if they're on waivers, you need to scoop them up. And that is James Cook, Zonovan Knight, Cam Akers, Greg Dulcich, and Mike White. 57 passing targets Mike White threw. That was just eye-popping to me. He had almost 400 yards through the air. Big game there. But we, like I talked about there for priority ads, James Cook and Zonovan Knight really coming into their own here as of late. James Cook had a 111-yard performance, and Zonovan Knight had 130 yards total again. And he honestly might just get the bulk. Michael Carter Jr. is expected to be back this week, but with Knight performing as what he has the past 2 weeks, I don't see him giving the reins over quite yet. And then, like Garrett said, Cam Akers having a big game. And Greg Dulcich has showed flash. He should have been on most rosters already, especially considering how thin that tight end room is. But if for some reason he is, Greg Dulcich is a tight end you can probably use for the rest of the year. He has a high volume in that offense.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time to remind people that, this is kind of your make and break point of the year where you have to kind of take a stance on some running backs that are out there on the waiver wire. It's a really good time to grab your own stashes, your own handcuffs, but it's also a really good time to grab everybody else's as well. A great example is last year, Rashad Penny was more or less a handcuff, and they really had some ambiguity to their offense in Seattle. And Rashad Penny absolutely took over that backfield, went buck wild, and won people some championships. He was a guy who down the playoff stretch absolutely was a make or break player. I know that my biggest league, the guy who won the league, he pretty much ran Jonathan Taylor and Rashad Penny.
Yes.
A two-headed duo there all the way to the championship. And it's just one of those situations where if there's an opportunity to grab some guys like this, Zonovan White, who's stepping up, James Cook, a guy who's got great opportunity, high draft pick, turning it on, and, Cam Akers, who, has shown in the past that he's got some. Great example of guys you should jump on and try to stash for your roster.
All right, let's get into some of our deeper ads. A lot of these guys are owned in less than 10% of leagues. Mm-hmm. The majority of our are owned in less than 30% of leagues, with only a couple above 30% roster capability. And some of these guys honestly could have some solid value for a down the stretch. Garrett hit us off here with the first two guys, kind of a stack.
Yeah, so a good example we just talked about Penny. Let's stick with the Seattle options. So, we already talked about Ken Walker and his weird foot injury he's got going on right now. DJ Dallas and Travis Homer, both owned in 3% or less of the leagues. DJ Dallas saw the most snaps and touches after the injury to Ken Walker, but Travis Homer saw some more snaps than Dallas earlier in the year. So those are two guys who, that option, if Ken Walker does go out, it's a little bit up in the air with which guy you might want to grab. I think right now I would lean towards DJ Dallas just because he was the one who they turned to most recently, and that's kind of, what we have to go on right now. So DJ Dallas as an ad, I think, is a great option. Seattle, good scoring offense. They've shown with Geno Smith, like you said, and the running backs, they just get the rock, and they get it a lot in that offense.
And we saw DJ Dallas as his rookie year in the league. He came in, actually, and filled in for a couple games there his rookie year and had a little stretch there where he's put up some solid RB2 numbers. So we know DJ Dallas can do that. The only thing with Travis Homer, the reason we have him on this list, like Garrett said, he saw more snaps, but he was inactive this week. So he was on IR. He should be coming off, actually, IR this week or next week. So that's why we just have him as a tentative ad, as with that offense, depending on the extent of Ken Walker's injury and if we hear more about it. This next guy is one of our more priority ads in our deeper ads. Honestly, you're in your last week here, one of your last weeks. This is a guy, if you lost a quarterback or need a bye week filler, this is a guy who can become a big priority ad and drop some fab on. And that's, like we mentioned earlier, Tyler Huntley. He filled in last year roughly 6 starts he had for the Baltimore Ravens. And in those times, he was putting up QB1 numbers. And there's a big reason behind that. He's got major rushing upside. Tyler Huntley is a lot like Lamar Jackson in the style where, honestly, that offense doesn't change a whole lot when he takes over. Doesn't quite have the arm as Lamar and not quite as, not saying he's Lamar Jackson, but he doesn't quite have that capabilities as Lamar does. But he's a solid runner. He's a very accurate passer. All not going to put up huge numbers through the air, but puts up pretty solid numbers through the air, averaging over 200 yards a game as a starter through the air, but around 50 yards or more rushing upside. So we've talked about these rushing upside guys. Look at Justin Fields, how he's exploded on the scene. Jalen Hurts, one of the top quarterbacks in the league. Depending on what your league format is and the scoring settings, rushing quarterbacks just have that much more edge in the scoring sheets compared to your pocket passers. And Tyler Huntley is one of those guys.
Yeah. For an offense that it's already built around Lamar Jackson, Tyler Huntley under the same mold steps right in. It just makes too much sense that he's going to see some fantasy relevance just with his legs. So it's been such a weird year in terms of quarterback production. There's a lot of options out there that you're kind of left with a sour taste in your mouth. So Tyler Huntley under the right matchup is absolutely a good streamer. Talking about streamers, every week we like to give you a nice tight end streamer out there. So we finally come back to a guy who earlier in the year was putting up some nice tight end one numbers, a rookie, before he saw a weird eye injury, and that's Daniel Bellinger. He had an orbital socket break. So It was something that potentially almost could have left him blinded, but luckily he was able to get that healed up. And now he comes out this past week and puts up 5 catches and adds a good, 24 yards. It's not a monster yardage day, but he's part of the offense and he's seeing targets. He's also out there for a ton of the game, seeing 96% of the snap share. So, that's huge for just being on the field. This offense has had a ton of injuries to the receiver room, and now with Bellinger stepping back in, he just got back. So we can only anticipate that his, usage on the offense is going to improve from here on out.
No, for sure. I like Daniel Bellinger. Like you talked about, Garrett, that wide receiving room is basically depleted right now. And for him to come back at this time where they're trying to get the offense rolling there in New York, he could play a pretty good role down the stretch here as a filler type guy for you. This guy is one of our highest owned guys in our deeper ads. Still not crazy high, only 39% of leagues, but has been putting up some, not numbers I should say, but snap share and targets his way, and target percentages, which are something you want to target and look for. And that is Nico Collins. He actually has been operating as a wide receiver one now in Texas, or in Tennessee, for the Texans, sorry, for the last 4 games or so. And in that time, he has had 36 targets in those 4 games. So almost 9 targets a game. That's pretty crazy. And he has had the most red zone targets out of the whole team in that time frame as well. He hasn't done huge production, but he's not been putting up bad, averaging right around 50 catches, 50 yards, and half a touchdown a game. So he's had 2 touchdowns in that time frame too. Not bad numbers for a guy who honestly could be rolling in as your wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 for the remainder of the season in the Houston offense.
Yeah, and another guy, we've been talking about these rushing or running backs and their opportunities out there. We saw some opportunity open up in that 49er backfield, and a lot of people were kind of screaming for Tyrion Davis-Price as a decent guy to add just out of speculation. And it ended up being Jordan Mason, who served kind of as the primary backup to CMC. Jordan Mason, undrafted, kind of a guy stepping in. Typical 49ers.
Kyle Shanahan does not care about draft capital.
Does not care. Not care. So Jordan Mason doesn't put up a huge snap share. Over the past few games, he's kind of seen like 10 to 15%. This past week, he has an 18% snap share. Not huge, but when he's out there, he had 8 rushes for 51 yards. So clipping off at over 6 yards a carry. They're not afraid to give him the ball when he's on the field. And we already saw Jimmy G injury. That offense could be changing back towards a more run-focused. And if that's the case, then we could see more 2-back sets. We can see more options where, CMC just needs to get off the field and get a breather. This 49ers offense is not afraid to rotate backs in. So Also, if it comes down to it, CMC is a guy who does get injured from time to time. He was already dealing with one last week. So Jordan Mason, great speculative ad. A guy I love to have it in deeper bench leagues.
Yep. Guy here, if like we talked about, buy him again in a week. Need a filler. Might be a home run here, but also could be more this week if Waddle misses time, and that is Trent Sherfield. He's owned in 2% of leagues. But honestly, he had a huge week this week because he had one catch for 75 yards and a touchdown. First play of the game. Numbers are deceiving there. But he's had 16 targets in the last 4 games. So it's not like he has been just out of the blue relevant. He's been seeing over a 60% snap share in that offense in the past 3 weeks. And if Waddle was to miss time, he is going to step into that wide receiver 2 role in a very, very pass-heavy attack with Tua, and could have some pretty good value if Waddle misses this week or more.
Yeah, that big long touchdown he had this week, he did a pretty good job at burning past the 49ers defense. And I don't know if they were just concentrated more or less on, the Waddle Hill combo, but, Sherfield absolutely burned him for a 75-yarder there. So we talked a little bit about Mike White in his pass attempts, but 57 passes this past week. A beneficiary of that is Corey Davis, who is the veteran in that offense, the Jets. Only 19% owned at this point. So I think with his injuries, a lot of people have dropped him, moved him kind of off their list. But early on in the year and last year, we've seen that when he's been healthy, he's been a big part of the offense. So this past week, he had 5 catches on 10 targets for 85 yards. Really good target numbers. Obviously, if Mike White's thrown 57 times, you want a piece of that offense no matter what, because those kinds of target numbers are flex worthy. So you can add guys in that offense. We know Garrett Wilson has kind of stepped up into a guy who's become a staple for your offense right now. He should be somebody who started in every league based on how he's performed the last several. Big player there. But Corey Davis as a staple for a guy who you can plug and play as a flex. I kind of like him as a deeper option.
Yeah, for sure. Guy here, very, very deep optioning. And these aren't guys we're going out saying out there, you have to add these guys. These are guys, if you really, really need a filler, depending on the depth of your league. If you're in a dynasty league maybe and you need somebody in one of your deep flexes, this is a guy too. We've talked about how New York's offense is really, really struggling as trying to get those playmakers in the offense. It seems like Darius Slayton is kind of locked in at that wide receiver 1 role and put up some solid weeks. But this guy's been secretly kind of rolling in that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 role. This week was definitely more in the wide receiver 2 role. That is Isaiah Hodgins. He's a big guy, has 3 catches or more in the last 3 games. But then this week had 5 catches on 6 targets for 44 yards and a touchdown. Obviously a pretty solid week in that standard, but a guy again here, we're just saying, if you really need that fill-in type guy, you're going to get him for pennies. Probably don't even have to put $85 on if you're even going to go for him in one of just those options where total sleeper type, shot in the dark type player.
Mm-hmm. Another guy on our list came back from injury, DJ Chark. Comes in this week. He's kind of had a pretty rough season as a first one with Detroit. He's really dealt with injuries the last few years, but tops his best week of the year so far after seeing several weeks off. I think it was 6 weeks off. He's kind of been eased back into the game plan. Puts up 5 catches on 6 targets for 98 yards, almost tops the 100-yard mark. They absolutely blew out Jacksonville, his former team, so he kind of got a nice revenge game in there. That offense, we know that Amon-Ra is a stud, and he's going to draw the top coverage options. DJ Chark is somebody who can open up the field, catch some long bombs, and Jameson Williams is also coming into the fold. He's not expected to be thrust into any position, see high snap shares, or anything like that. So it's not a situation where you're going to have Jameson Williams coming in and taking over. DJ Chark is going to be seeing good snaps out there and pretty much throughout the rest of the year.
The Lions, typical Lions, they use a first-round pick on a fly guy for the punt. That's all Jameson Williams was activated for this week. Was His only snaps he saw were special team snaps, and he was the fly guy on the outsides for punts. Obviously, that's subject due to change. But, like Garrett said, DJ Chark, it was more shocking was the fact of the Lions have been battling a really, really depleted injury wide receiver core this year. This was the most healthy they've been all year. They had Chark healthy, Reynolds healthy, Khalif Raymond healthy, who all have seen flashes this year, where Reynolds kind of looked like that wide receiver 2 there for a little bit, but now Chark, completely stepping over him this week and kind of having a big game here. And let's get up to Jared Goff, too. I mean, he's been honestly very underappreciated the last couple of weeks, what he's been doing for this Lions offense, and has been playing solid ball. I don't know if you saw it, Garrett, or not, but actually the Lions are favored +1 this week, or -1 against the Vikings, the 10-2 Vikings. Not, I don't know, kind of crazy there, but seeing the Lions favored against the Vikings at Minnesota is shocking.
Yeah.
And I mean, like I said, we get they blew out the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Vikings barely beat the Jets, but it is what it is there. Another tight end streamer guy, big dynasty ad, honestly, if you can get him in dynasty leagues right now, but has been putting up some solid quietly. His target share or snap share is getting up higher and higher and higher. And this is an offense where they just lost their number 1 target, and he stepped in this week and filled in kind of as a number 1 role for this week, and that is Chig Okonkwo. And I don't know if
I was waiting for the name draw there to see how you got it.
And he is a tight end, 5th-round draft pick out of Tennessee, but he is not your typical tight end build. He's a smaller tight end. He's kind of got the build of like Treylon Burks in that fashion where, he's long, but he's fast. And he kind of had a big catch there, but he had 4 catches on 5 targets for 68 yards. So, honestly, if you were streaming him this weekend, good for you. He put up a solid week for you. But, Hooper's been underwhelming besides that big game he had against Green Bay. But Chig, he could step if Burke misses significant time and or this week. Robert Woods, the age looks like has caught up to him, has had a really, really down year. Nick Westbrook-Akeen hasn't done much besides 1 game. Tennessee needs a pass-catching threat, and if he can step in there and be that guy, it could be a solid, streaming option here at the tight end position.
Yeah, and the last guy on our list here is a tight end as well. We're just going to hit it again with a decent streaming option. Noah Fant, only owned in 19% of the leagues. Obviously, he's had some fantasy success in the past. Comes out this past week, has 4 catches on 5 targets, 42 yards, and a touchdown. But why is he on this list? Because we know that his year so far hasn't been that great. Well, next week they play Carolina, a pretty good matchup for tight ends. He's going to go out there, have some good opportunity. We've seen injuries kind of come and go for that offense. And if they do turn more towards the passing game with injuries to the running backs, Fant could become a bigger part of that offense and have some potentially more opportunities for scoring.
Yep. And we don't have anything else to cover here, guys. That's our waiver wire ads and wrap up for the week. We just want to be saying thanks for tuning in, everybody. We know we've been kind of hitting, the same role here on what we've been covering every week. We will be covering different stuff once the season ends. We're going to give you some dynasty tips. We're going to give you some stashes. We're going to give you some, draft strategy prep again. So get ready for that stuff. We will be hammering those out as well as the season goes on.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. If you're at all interested in becoming a sponsor of this show, feel free to reach out. Send us some merch. We'll do an ad read. We'll wear your stuff. We'll look good. And, so thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we'll see you next week.